This is wildlife biologist Eric Orff with New Hampshire Fish and Wildlife YouTube channel. It's July 31st, 2019. Well, today I'm going to choose a subject that's near and dear to my heart, mountain lions. I was the fur bearer biologist in New Hampshire for New Hampshire Fish and Game Department from around 1980 until I retired in 2007, so about 31 years. And a good portion of that I was the fur bearer biologist for New Hampshire. So, and also the black bear biologist. So what are the four animals that I got calls on, often from the press or somebody, on a weekly basis? Black bears, coyotes, fisher, and mountain lions. So those are the animals that seem to be of most interest to folks across New Hampshire over the 3 decades that I worked on those animals. Well, the mountain lion has been a subject of interest for a long time. If we look at Helen Silver's book, A History of New Hampshire Game and Fur Bearers, there's a several-page section about mountain lions. Henry Laramie was the supervisor that hired me in the game division in October of 1978, and in the early 80s he passed on to me this whole big folder of mountain lion information and sightings going back probably a couple decades, so into the 50s anyways. And so I was the keeper of the mountain lion records for most of my career at New Hampshire Fish and Game. And as part of that, I think in the early 80s, certainly around 84, 85, we actually, hey, I'm also a bureaucrat, I guess, if I work for a state agency. So we came up with a form for mountain lion sightings, because the sightings that were in the records were on piece scraps of paper, this or that. So we came up with a form that you had to fill out, obviously the date and time of the sighting, the person's contact information, a description of where the event occurred, as specific as they could be, and a very good description of the animal, the shape of the ears, of the face, the color, the length of the tail, the shape of the tails. We had a whole series of questions, and a couple times over that 30-year career, I think I went out looking for signs when the sighting was a day or two old, hoping to find some kind of sign. So records of mountain lions were common. In fact, one year I think there was close to 100 sightings. Now basically this form I sent out to all regional offices. So Fishing Game has 4 regional offices in Lancaster and Keene. I happen to be Region 3 in Durham. There's one in New Hampton, plus the headquarters in Concord. So they all had the form. So they, the staff who took the call or the call went to would fill out the form and ask in detail. And so I collected these forms. And one year I had close to 100, I think. And it's funny. I decided at one point in the 80s or in the 2000s to take a look at these reportings over the last decade or so. And guess what? I mapped them out town by town across New Hampshire. There were as many sightings in Manchester as there were in Pittsburgh. So there was no hot spot for mountain lions in New Hampshire. Although the Monadnock region in my mind kind of has a history of having frequent mountain lion sightings. In fact, Ted Walsky, the Region 4 wildlife biologist, had a couple of deer hunters in tree stands in the fall, and they watched a mountain lion defecate and collected it and got it to Ted. Well, Ted got it to me, and I shipped it down to, I think, Virginia Tech, where they did a DNA analysis of that mountain lion scat dropping, and it came back as bobcat. So somehow this mountain lion that was observed and sworn to by the hunter in the tree stand was a bobcat scat. Now the actual last mountain lion killed in New Hampshire was killed in 1853 in the town of Lee, and it's actually in a mount in a museum in Dover. And I actually have been to that museum a couple times to see that mount. So it's still around in the Woodman Museum in Dover. If that's still open, that's certainly that specimen is still there, killed in 1853, the last known one. And it's funny rereading this morning, the Helen Silver's description of what she called the panther in her book. There were numerous sightings in the 30s and 40s and 50s. This book was published in the late 50s. So the mountain lion sightings have been common throughout our history. And she points out that when a mountain lion was killed in the 1700s, into the early 1800s, it was a big fanfare. It was known far and wide that someone had killed a mountain lion. There's half a dozen or more accounts here of mountain lions being killed all over New Hampshire in the 1700s into the early 1800s. So it was quite a thing. And they, according to her, this publication, they were never very common. So it was a rarity when they were somewhat common for anybody to ever see one. So they were quite rare. So out of these hundreds of sightings, have we ever proven any? The answer is no. Could we have a mountain lion? Absolutely. I've worked with wildlife my whole life. Nothing is out of the realm of possibility. So, in fact, maybe a decade ago now, there was a mountain lion killed in Connecticut. And through DNA analysis of that mountain lion and scat that had been left in various places, it was determined that mountain lion came from the Dakotas across the northern part of our country through New York, where there was evidence, and ended up getting killed in Connecticut. So could it happen? Absolutely. I mean, I have been on the phone with people that describe a mountain lion to a T, and I just can't figure out. We just don't have any. I tell people we don't have any physical evidence that we could take to a court, DNA samples, scat samples, a kill, tracks. And we've tried. I mean, I think it'd be great if there was a mountain lion here. Cool. We got more deer than we've had in 200 years right now. 120,000 deer. So mountain lions are increasing in numbers across North America. Of course, with the deer herd back the way it is. And one interesting quote I saw this morning, or read this morning, was in the 1940s or 50s. She said, 30 years ago, the sighting of a deer in southern New Hampshire or a mountain lion were equally unreliable. So there were very few deer in the 1920s that were never seen in southern New Hampshire. So they did disappear as well in the 1800s. So mountain lions, we get records, but nowadays, there are thousands, certainly thousands of game cameras or trail cameras spread across the state. On Facebook and elsewhere, I see pictures every day of deer and bobcats and even coyotes, and so people are taking pictures constantly with these remote cameras throughout New Hampshire and New England. Guess what? Nobody is taking pictures of mountain lions, and if you talk to anybody that has worked with mountain lions out west, they make a lot of sign. Their tracks are very distinguishable. You don't very often see them, but they leave a lot of sign. And I think with all these trail cameras, we would certainly pick up any resident population of mountain lions. So do we have mountain lions? We could very well have the occasional one that is moving through the state, but I'm convinced that there is no resident population. So the fact is, we could have mountain lions, but there is certainly no resident population. So fact or fiction is, yeah, mountain lions could come here. Fiction is that we have a resident population.